Hey, welcome back to Scattered Bible. We are currently in the book of Daniel and we're looking at chapter 3 in this video, which includes, massive fires, people getting thrown in them, giant statues, and just kind of part of the fun that is the book of Daniel, which is kind of this story of this group of people that have been taken from their home and placed in the all-forming, all-consuming empire that is Babylon. As we observe, as we hear how they kind of cling to the hope and ways of Yahweh and not be dissolved into the city's ways, into the empire's way of being. And it's fascinating because even though this book is like thousands of years old, it's so relevant for us today. It has been already, and we're only 3 chapters in, as we explore, as followers of Jesus, how to cling to his ways, how to be formed by his hope, by the future he has promised us, and not by this world and its message and its sermon and its way of being. We've got to work right. We've got to exist in this world. Where do we draw the line? Where do we not draw the line? Well, in this chapter, we see 3 of the 4 guys that have been pulled from their home. They draw a line. And it's really interesting. And so that's enough from me. Let's open up Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors and advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, and magistrates, and all other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and people of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of God that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all other kinds of music, all the nations and people of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Let me pause there. I think it's funny that in the last chapter, well, funny but also sad, in the last chapter we see King Nebuchadnezzar have this dream. And he had this dream of this giant statue that was meant to show him that his reign will not last forever, that he is not above the true King of Kings. And isn't it funny how our mind justifies things and what it does, and our own brokenness, our own pride and ego, what it turns those things into. And so he learned a lesson in the last chapter. But almost instantly in this chapter, he's taken that dream to obviously mean he needs to build a golden statue in his own image. And you can kind of get lost in why he did this. Because we know it's an ancient book, we start to think, oh, silly ancient people. Did they believe the statue was alive? Did they believe the statue was magic? Why are they worshipping a statue? How ridiculous. We wouldn't do that in our modern world. Let me encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. Because I don't know if they were worshipping this because they thought it was magic. Look at the people who were initially invited. The prefects, the magistrates, the politicians. This is not a magic statue. This is not a statue that grants them goodwill. This is a political statement. This is a statue that I don't believe they think is coming alive or anything like that. They're saying this statue represents the king, yes, and the greatness of Babylon, the ways and the kingdom at that stage of the world of Babylon. And so worshipping it, bowing to it, is saying we are the people of Babylon. We are the greatest kingdom of all time. We are the golden empire. This is a political statement. And all of a sudden, just by scratching the surface, we suddenly realize it isn't an ancient thing to have a political statue which speaks to the values, the greatness of certain empires or cities. Add to this the political conversation we see around the world at the moment, as people talk about their political party almost religiously. This, or everything the left does, that will save us. This president, prime minister, king, they and their policy, they will save us. People are very passionate about their political worldview. People are very religious about these things at the moment. And it's only as the world kind of gets a little bit chaotic or more chaotic, it only gets more intense. And so suddenly, this ancient group of people, this king, making a political statement and saying, worship it, doesn't feel as far away as we might initially think. As our world increasingly becomes more religious about its political statements, about its political figures. Let's continue to read. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to the King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever." What suck-ups. "Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you. Your majesty, they neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I've made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" I won't comment too much here, but I did feel important to note, if you are following the ways of Jesus, if you are pursuing him even by living a quiet, humble life in his ways, then please do not be shocked that people will not like you. People will not like the peace that you carry. People will not like your non-anxious presence, because it speaks straight to their restless soul. And so right through the Bible, we see people backstab followers of Yahweh and then followers of Jesus. This should not shock you. Anyone that is trying to tell you that when you follow Jesus, people will instantly like you, is just incorrect and setting you up to fall. People will be annoyed by this hope you carry because they are hopeless. People will be annoyed by this peace you carry because they are chaotic. People will be annoyed by your growing non-anxious presence because they are riddled with anxiety. And so they will backstab you. They will come after you. Not always in a dramatic way like we see here, but please expect this. Be praying into this. And not surprised so much, but encouraged that obviously they see some God in you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of God you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times more hotter than usual. and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. This part might be my favourite part of the whole chapter. The way these guys respond. The king kind of gives them a way out. Hey, next time this happens, just bow down and it'll all be good. And they go, no, we're not going to bow down to a created image. We only bow down to the creator. We're not going to be formed in your ways. We're not going to bow down to this political move. We don't believe in the empire of Babylon. We know that it will fall like every other empire, like every other kingdom. We don't hope in that. We don't hope in you, king. We have a deeper, more formative, more trustworthy, more reliable hope to place our life and our soul in. And really, that's the only way you could respond like that, if you had a deep hope. The type of response that says, do you know what? God might save us, he may not. But we'll be okay. Because the creator, the God Yahweh, who we serve, is bigger than death. And so that's all you've got, king. That's the worst you can do, but we'll be okay. We'll be good because our God is good. Just pause for a moment there, because I think that is profound. Whether you're chucked in the fire this week or not, whether you're having the worst day, do you have that type of hope? And I guess that connects to the wider question we'll be asking in this series. Where are you placing your hope? Is it in an empire? Is it in a king? Is it in a political party or agenda? Is it in an idea, a person, your own ability? Or is your soul anchored to the type of hope that is bigger than death? Proven bigger than death through Jesus? Because that type of hope, that is the type of hope that means you can respond and go, hey, whatever today brings, it might be bad and you're allowed to have bad days. I'm not saying you can never be sad or never be upset or never go, that was a day. That's ridiculous. Of course you can. But in the deepest part of you in your soul, you know, hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to be good because our God is. And that's where your hope is placed. What a, again, favourite part of this chapter. Let's continue reading, because here's one more point. They do get chucked in the fire. There's no last minute scapegoat. There's no last minute change of plan. They actually get chucked in the fire. I find that fascinating. It's not like, oh, the king makes a final decision. Oh, by your declaration, I can see you believe this stuff. Let's not do it. No. He turns up the heat and says, okay, and chucks them in. Now, I know the next bit's pretty cool. But I really think there's something profound in that, even that last bit, that they do get chucked in. That they do go in the fire. God will allow us to go through hard times. That is almost a sure thing. That's not the question here. The question is, where does your hope lie in those moments? What gives you strength? What gives you hope? What lets you be secure about your future now and for eternity? And there's also some other questions which we're going to get to, but let's continue reading. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, Your Majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So there you go. That's the end of that chapter. What a way to end that chapter. The king looks and there's 4 guys in there, all of them unharmed. The ropes are burnt, so there is a fire. It is hot. However, there's this son of gods in there, which is probably best translated to be angelic, an angel. However, I like to think it could be Jesus. Only because that is such a Jesus thing to do and a place that Jesus would be with these guys. However, there's no proof either way, but certainly it's a messenger of God. And certainly it is a very God thing to do, is be with them and rescue them. That's so cool. And it's just, that's not the only question I have. There's so many questions. I think as I reflected on this scripture, one of the major questions I got is, why draw the line there? Why draw the line? And what do I mean? I mean, well, they already live in Babylon. There's so many things they would have to compromise in a sense. They're working for this evil empire. They're sorting that out. There's things they have to do. There's things that they don't do. And so why not? And hear me, why not bow to the statue? I think that's an important human question to ask. Who's it going to hurt? Why not pretend? Why not fake it for now? And a solid answer is, it's one of the big commandments given in the Old Testament. It's one of the 10 commandments. Let me read it here. This is likely one of the reasons that this was a place to draw the line. In Exodus, it says, "And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath, in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." So the first of the 10 commandments is a pretty good reason for these guys to not bow down. It's pretty clear, and so they've decided that's where they can draw the line. That's where they're willing to say, hey, we're going to risk our life for this. However, I'm going to be honest, and I don't know if it was just the mood I was in, but my curiosity was still not fully scratched. Because as I read that and I saw God being a jealous God, I honestly, I had to ask why. Why of all the things does God care about that? God is complete, right? God doesn't lack anything. And so why does he care if they bow down to this idol? Why does he care if they just fake it or not? Why does he care? Why does he care about this particular thing? Why does God draw the line there? And why should we? And without turning this into a self-centric message, because there's heaps of reasons found in the Bible, there was one that grabbed me afresh as I studied and as I explored and I scratched a little bit beneath the surface. And that is that he cares because he cares about us. Because as I did some research, both in the New Testament and Old Testament, I was reminded of the profound connection between worship and formation. Let me explain by reading some of these passages. Romans 12:1-2 says this, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. There's worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. As in view of God's mercy, as we worship, it forms us. 2 Corinthians 3:17 to 18 says, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with the ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. As we look upon his face, we are transformed into his image. We don't worship the created image, we worship the Creator, and we become his image. Clear as message there. Psalms 115:4-8 says this, Old Testament, but their idols are silver and gold made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, noses but cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but cannot walk. Nor can they utter a sound with their throat. Sounds very relevant to this story. Those who make them will be like them. And so with all who trust in them. You trust, you make, you worship, you are formed. Matthew 6:33 says this, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Again, a verse you could take out of context to say you'll be just given all this stuff. You seek him first and he'll give you a car. Maybe. But I think more importantly and more closer to God's heart is we seek him. And we are formed. And we are changed. And we are blessed through that formation. To sum this up, worship shapes us. Who we are worshipping is likely who we are becoming. Worship shapes us. Because God is not any less God if we don't worship him. God is still God. What is true is true. God is still good if we don't worship him. He is not incomplete. But I think one of the major reasons, as shown in the Bible, that he cares so much about what we worship is because he knows that's who we will become. He knows our worship will shape us. So of course it's number one of the 10 Commandments. Worship him. He's talking to a people that he's already promised at that time in Exodus that he wants to make into a nation that will be his hands and feet. So it makes sense that his number one rule is, in order to become my hands and feet, in order to become this royal priesthood that will show my love and grace to the nations, in order to be formed in that way, number one is you better worship me because it's going to rub off. You better worship me because that's how you're formed. That's why it's so important. That's why he cares. Here's the big question though then. My last pivot. Why should we care? Maybe you don't know Jesus. Maybe you're just exploring and watching his videos because you're curious. And it's a valid question. Maybe you're a Christian, but you're deeply asking this question. Why do we want to be formed into God? Why? Why should we care? Why should we put our lives at risk? Why should we put our hope, all our eggs in that basket? You're allowed to ask that question, by the way. Anyone that says you're not may just not fully understand the truth, may not be secure enough in their hope, may have not been allowed to ask that question. So ask away. God's big enough to handle that. Why should we care? Well, let me tell you out of this story. Because we're now in chapter 3 and God's done some things, but he hasn't appeared in the book yet. The Bible is a library of books talking about man's relationship with God and his plan for them and the way he has helped and saved and challenged them. Yet we're chapter 3 in a book and God hasn't shown up yet until now. Let me ask you this. Where does he show up? Does he show up in the palace to debate the king? Did he show up in splendor to prove that he's God in the sky? All those things are okay. God could do that. He shows up in the fire. The very first place in this book he shows up is in the chaos, in the mess with his followers. That is a beautiful, accurate image of who God is. One of the most famous verses, John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life." God is a type of God that's in there with you. And if that wasn't enough, we see this fully fulfilled in Jesus. The type of God that would walk amongst us, that would live, get his feet dirty in the sandals, talk and wrestle through questions with his students, teach about a coming kingdom, teach about a deeper hope, teach about the type of peace that allows you to sleep in the storm, not because you're crazy, but you know who has control of it all. And then a type of God that would die and make a way for us to be back into relationship, full relationship with that God, both now and forever. Life now and forever. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is you care about the empire. And I'm talking to us today. You care about their ways. You care about what they think. You care about your social media. You deeply worship their political views. I'm not saying you're not allowed to have views, but you make that your identity. That's who you try and become. You care about wealth. You care about your career title. That's what you base your hope into. And that's okay. You get to make that choice. But let me remind you of a little line that I missed the first few times that I read this passage. A line that speaks about some other people, some other servants to that empire. Ones that come and throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in, and they don't even have names. Loyal soldiers to that empire who don't even have names, are not even part of the story. Their families, their friends, their careers, not even mentioned. Except that they burnt alive as they threw these other guys. As they served the empire, as they served the king and his throne, the king doesn't even care. They're just tools. They're just in the way. In fact, no, they're helpful. They probably made the fire hotter. That's the empire's view of you. That's how long-lasting, that's how hopeless, that's how chaotic, that's how ego-driven and prideful is the ways of this world. Its consequence is death and destruction. And so, do what you want. That is the challenge. You get that choice in this life. Do you worship the God who's in the fire with you? Whatever you're going through this week, today even, this year, God is there with you. Yes, we don't live in the perfect kingdom to come. We live in a place and a time in our own consequence that we have chose where there is death and destruction. But we are becoming, or we have the opportunity to become a God who is there with us, that it always is looking to form, that is always looking to shape us into that compassionate, loving, peaceful, non-anxious presence. Or we have the empire. It's always looking to use, always looking to get ahead, is competitive. Yes, is all consuming and teaches you to consume the same. Sees you as a product or a purchaser of a product, a view, a political party, a celebrity, whatever. You know the drill. And so now you have your options. It's worth asking those questions again as we wrap up this chapter. What are you going to place your hope into? Where are you going to draw the line? What are you worshipping? And therefore, what and who are you becoming? Thanks for joining me. Can I encourage you to let me know what's challenged you, what's encouraged you? I sometimes wonder if I'm just speaking to I am, an empty garage. Am I just speaking to myself? But I would love this to be the beginning of a conversation, and I will do my best to respond and reply and even address questions. And so please engage with this if it's engaging for you. It lets me know what areas to focus on, lets me know what videos to make. And so, yeah, of course, do the social media thing, hit subscribe, hit like, but most importantly, comment, reach out, and let's discuss. What did you like? What did you not like? What did you hate? What were your questions? I'd love to hear it all. And so thanks again, and look forward to seeing you in chapter 4 or one of my other videos. See you then.